Now, it was once seen as a scourge of working-class Dublin, but now heroin use is on the rise throughout Ireland. Today, Hot Press presents a special investigation into the country's growing heroin habit.
It claims that the real number of heroin addicts is almost double the official estimates, and it also states that there are heroin black spots all over the country. Joining us to discuss this is Stuart Clark from Hot Press and Dr. Garrett McGovern, a GP who has specialised in the treatment of heroin addiction for the last 12 years. You're both very welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Stuart, I'm going to come to you first. Yeah. What prompted Hot Press to take this investigation and to bring us these very shocking and startling figures?
Well, we'd heard anecdotal evidence and then Dr. McGovern contacted us. I think the media, took our eye off the ball during the whole headshot furore. That was the sexy story, if you like. But local newspapers, because this is happening in their backyards, were covering it. We did some digging around, and places like Kildare and Portlaoise and Mullingar and Limerick and Clonakilty. And what really shocked me as a journalist was I always thought if there's a big health problem emerging, the HSE would swing into action. Selbridge, small place, 100 people who cannot get any treatment for their heroin problems. So I thought, well, doctors will be bussed down there, emergency clinics. No, there is absolutely no coordinated response. I think the doctor will say that you're 13 times more likely to die outside of treatment than you are in it. Yet the waiting lists around the country are 18 months to 2 years, but they're longer than that, really, because people know there's no point phoning up the treatment centre in Waterford because it's 18 months, 2 years. We're not going to get in. We spoke to addicts in the Portlaoise area who are attending a clinic. Now, the individuals working in the field are fantastic, but apparently the clinic is falling down. It should be condemned. So we're seeing a pattern of absolute neglect. This is not a new problem. Heroin arrived in this country in, what, the 80s, in meaningful quantities.
Is that the issue? That we kind of think heroin, oh, that was a problem in the past, wasn't it? That we seem, somehow...
There was no new angle, but, well, there is now, because it's in every parish, virtually.
So how many people are addicts, according to the Hot Press investigation?
We spoke to a couple of doctors. Garrett was identified. We spoke to another very senior health official who, for political reasons, couldn't be identified. And he reckoned that 14,500, there could be 30,000. Because so many people are outside the system. They're not coming forward, they're not signing up, and they're certainly not in treatment.
I've spoken to a few police officers who work in the area, and very few people realise the cost to a local economy of a heroin addict, because to feed their habit they need somewhere between 200 to 300, depending on how bad it is, 200 to 300 euros worth of stuff a day. Now, to get that, they have to steal.
On the market, crime is definitely going up. There's no two ways about it.
To get 200-300 euro, they need to steal 2,000-3,000, and they need to do this every day. So the amount of theft and damage that's done by a heroin addict feeding his habit or her habit is quite extraordinary. Now, you total that up and do the math, and you're into costs of millions, more in actual fact than it would cost to treat these people. So it beggars belief that nothing is done about it.
A few years ago, not as an inmate, and the governor sort of looked through the window, and I said, well, how many of those people are in jail because of hard drugs? He went, 60, 70%? Wow. That's 100 grand a year. And the other thing, of course, is HIV. People are outside of programmes. There's no needle exchange. They're using dirty needles. There's a good chance of contracting HIV. I think the cost to treat a patient on methadone per year is around about 4,000 or 5,000 euro. If they've got HIV, it's 25,000 to 30,000 a year, and a very expensive death.
Stuart, is this linked in any way to the recession? Just before we bring the doctor in, I mean, are people turning to this drug because things are bleak and awful and there's no jobs? I mean, is there a rise in the amount of people taking it? Clearly there is.
I would imagine there's a definite correlation. And I think the fact we've got a lot of rural poverty now, you know, grinding rural poverty again, that's why in places like Kildare, where people don't really notice it. It's quite hidden. There's a real stigma there.
I was just about to say, all the places you have mentioned I've been to and only ever had lovely times in, and I would be completely oblivious to any heroin problem whatsoever in any of the places.
I have friends living there who haven't realised, but it's definitely there.
Gareth, you've been working in this area for 12 years, so you've watched what has happened, you've watched the trends. You know, there's the frontline business that you have to do, which is dealing with it, but there's also the socio-economic context in which this is happening. So if you can, in a short space of time, give us a kind of a thumbnail of what you think has happened and why we've come to this stage.
Well, the response to the developing heroin problem around the country has been very slow, but you could argue that the response to the problem in Dublin was very slow, only that the goodwill of the communities in many hotspots, and we all know where they are, I don't need to name them, that were communities that were decimated by drug use. The response was very, very slow. I mean, methadone maintenance, I think, only came in 93, 94. It was only officialised in the methadone treatment protocol in 1998. That was slow. You know, drugs have been in the country since early 1980s. Many people died. There was an explosion of HIV, and it was only in response to the HIV explosion and secondarily to crime that they actually treated people. It's a terribly stigmatised disease. This is mushrooming out of control around the country. It's interesting, Sinead, that you mentioned you don't see them. You don't see them because they're not on your face. It's a very, very stigmatising disease. They don't do it. They don't use their drugs in the same way as we drink alcohol. It is a disease. It's a chronic relapsing disease, and it's recognised by the World Health Organization as such, and it needs treatment.
The heroin is a particularly nasty, insidious drug because it isn't just what it does to the person who's taking it, it's also what it does to the family and what it does to the community that person lives in. When I was a younger man involved in music and out on the road, you couldn't get pot in most of the places that you're now talking about. Outside of Dublin, heroin was unheard of. In fact, there was an almost pathological resistance to it in Cork. There was never. You know, and you know, when you're on the ground, you know when that stuff is there or not. So how, in the name of God, has it managed to get into places like Gorey and Sligo and towns that we see on picture postcards that you don't even associate with having traffic problems, let alone drug problems?
Well, it's a very interesting drug in many ways, heroin, because it's very physically addictive. It's second to only nicotine in terms of its physical addiction potential. I think drug dealers play on this because if you go into a town which has no treatment service and you provide heroin and start selling it, you're going to get a lot of people addicted over a period of time. They're going to come back to you for more and more heroin. So it's a very clever ploy in many ways.
But Gareth, so it's calculated, Gareth. It's a money-making,
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge business.
It was always considered to be a nasty, a dirty drug. It was a drug of desperation. It was a drug of you're living in a sinkhole estate, no future, no jobs, no money. This was a way to find oblivion. You know, people with any kind of future or job, by and large, even if they were recreational drug users, avoided it. So how has that changed?
Well, it's changed because it's no longer particularised to the socially disadvantaged groups. And as I mentioned in that article, class distinction is a lot less obvious in many places around the country. And many people are drifting. I've seen people from all walks of life come to me looking for treatment that have been told in their local area, you've got to go to Dublin to get a treatment and there's a waiting list in Trinity Court. It may as well not be a waiting list because really the chances of getting treatment are practically nil.
You'd actually have a better chance if you went to England.
There is a very, I don't like to use the word solution and I don't like to use the word simple, but there is a very obvious remedy to this, and that is that people like myself who are experienced in this field are capped at the numbers we can treat. We can treat 35 heroin users in our practice. That cap could be lifted. And also, there are a number of very experienced people around the country, but particularly in Dublin, who could work in more than one general practice and go down perhaps once a week to places like Gorey, you know, Cork. Cork has a huge problem, and actually take some of the burden off these cities because it really is a huge problem and it's going to get worse.
We're going to have to leave it there, guys. And the investigation is in hot press today, Stuart?
Out this morning.
Oh, out this morning. OK, thank you both very much.